Welcome to the Photographer Show, where we talk to you, the everyday photographers in the photo focus community, about your love of photography and dig into some of the fun, nerdy stuff we all love about the art and craft of photography. My name is Wyden Kivowitz, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Lauri Novak. And for everyone watching live in the webinar or on YouTube, please share in the chat where you're watching from, and also if you are a digital or film photographer. So first, hey, Lauri. Sorry,
Hey,
I didn't mean to cut you off before.
No, I'm getting used to it.
That's how our relationship is.
Yeah.
What is this? Is episode 3.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It's funny because I feel like a month in between each show is a pretty good amount of time, but I feel like it also
comes
flies
really fast.
by.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Yeah. So we've got a bunch of people watching live, and hopefully that keeps growing and growing. Today we have Jim Sollows with us, and so I'm excited about this. And I learned something special about Jim right before we started going live, and I can't wait till we get into that. So, Jim, welcome to the Photographer Show. We're happy to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been first picked up a camera in 1973, so I've been shooting for a while, and for the past I don't know how long, for quite a while, I eventually switched from film to digital, and shoot predominantly Fuji. I shoot Fuji X series, X100, X-T20, and X-T3, and just in the past few years, I've started to get into shooting film. Kind of a funny story about how that happened, and maybe we'll get into that later. But film has started to take over more of a role. I still do shoot a lot of digital, probably about 50-50. I love shooting my Fujis. I love shooting digital, but I also like shooting film, and particularly I enjoy shooting old film cameras. And one of my oldest cameras is dated 1914, and
Wow.
they don't just sit on the shelf. I restore them and I shoot them. So I really
Nice.
enjoy that aspect.
That's amazing. Yeah, I have old cameras, but it's more of a collection, and I don't think a lot of them work. So So for those joining us live in the webinar or on YouTube, there is a Q&A section. There is a live chat. You will be able to ask Jim questions. So at any time, just ask your question, and Lauri's going to be moderating that, and we'll be able to get to those questions, which hopefully you'll have some good ones for him to answer. So Jim, you mentioned that it was in the 70s that you started in photography.
Yeah. And
you started film, which a lot of the photo focus community, I'm going to guess, majority are photographing on digital. Some of them might be mixed. I doubt there's going to be some that are primarily film, but we're going to be diving into a little bit of both today. So I'm excited. What was the first camera, if you remember your first camera that you had when you first started in photography?
Oh, I remember it well. I was in high school, and I was a science nerd, and I ended up in a high school that was all sports. Everything was focused on sports, and needless to say, I fit in like a square peg in a round hole. And one of my teachers was looking at trying to find ways to get this science geek to fit in, and got me involved in the school newspaper and the yearbook, and gave me this ratty old film camera that the school had, and I used that. There was several of us. We all had to share this old camera, and then one day, I guess I was complaining about it on an ongoing basis. And then one day, my dad comes home and gives me a Praktica. It was a new at the time, so this would be in 1973. That was my very first film camera, and I used that for quite a while. once I started, I finished my schooling, my college, ended up working. I work in the healthcare profession, and I eventually ended up actually shooting this. This is a Contax 139, and this camera and I were separable. It actually wasn't this very camera. I sold that one, regretted it, and managed to find an identical one, and have been using it since.
Been there and done that. You know, there's times you're like, why am I holding on to this old camera? And then you sell it and you're like, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. Oh man. I did that with a Hasselblad X-Pan at one point, and I really wish I didn't do that. At this, you know, yeah.
I wish you'd given it to me.
That thing was so much fun, and then I just stopped using it. Anyway, so speaking of cameras, from the discussion that we had prior to going live, we were talking about that you are currently sitting in a dark room right now. You are sitting in a dark room. It's not dark right now, obviously. But can you talk about what your current camera or cameras are? Because you're obviously doing both between digital and film. And then after that, let's dive into a little bit about the whole darkroom thing. Because I think there's going to be some film lovers who are going to get a kick out of your setup.
Okay. Well, as far as cameras go, I won't go into the list because I currently have a current count, I think 39 of them.
And you use them all? Do you use them all on and off?
Pretty much. There's one or two in that collection. I only have cameras that are what I refer to as historically significant. So a perfect example of that would be this one. You guys will probably both be familiar with these. This is the Graflex, and I shoot this one. I love this old camera, and they made history, and so I use that quite a bit. Probably my number one film camera is my beloved Leica M6. I adore this camera. It goes everywhere with me, and I use a Mamiya RB67 medium format. And just a variety of, I think I've got, I've also got the Nikon F, F2, all of which I really enjoy shooting those as well. So I've got a good collection in addition to my my Fujis. My favorite Fuji is the Fuji X100, and beautiful, beautiful film camera, or a digital camera. But I think part of the transition from digital to film was actually this camera, because it so closely resembles the Leica. Yeah. They're almost identical. Right. Even the position of the controls. It's a digital camera, but it works like a film camera, and it kind of got me thinking. So so that was sort of my what started to get me hooked on film.
And I think that Fuji system, that the cameras that even replaced that model, they all have that sort of hybrid EVF rangefinder view, right? So it really is this natural rangefinder feel, but then you've got that digital stuff in it, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I'm a fan of that camera. I use Nikons myself, but I'm a fan of that camera. I got to play with it a bunch of times and I enjoyed it. So can you tell us a little bit about your darkroom setup? Because it looks like an office. There's a window, and I think you're going to share some cool things about how you set this up. So can you just, I don't even know, are you able to turn your camera a little to show more of it? Sure. Or without you screwing things up?
It's a pretty small room. Yeah, I can pivot the camera. So I'll just turn you over in this direction. So window right in front of me here is my Durst enlarger. A lot of the film people will be familiar with the darkroom timers, and then the wet area. Yes, let's wait for the lighting to come back. There we go. And so films up top, chemicals are all stored down below. And I think what makes it unique is that big window sitting there. And those of you that have shot in a darkroom before need to know that the room has to be completely dark. And I have a couple of safe lights up in the ceiling, so when the room is dark, I get that familiar red glow in the room that allows me to work with paper and chemicals. But the window is a problem, and so I've actually in addition to photography, I also do a fair amount of woodworking. And so I came up with a shutter system that allows me to just in a matter of a few minutes to completely seal off that window so it is absolutely light tight and turns this room into a true dark room.
Awesome.
And you automated it with electronics, so you can like push a button?
Not yet. It's a manual process, but
okay.
Yeah, I'm working on that one.
Because I, as Lauri knows, I'm the nerd who likes automation like that. My entire light setup behind me is completely automated. So,
very cool.
And in front of me with one button, just everything switches to what I need. So I'm a big fan of that process. I do have a question because you have a window which you are light sealing, but ventilation wise, are you opening the window to let air in and out so you can not, hurt yourself from all the chemicals, or do you have other ventilation in that room?
Right above me in the ceiling is a ventilation system. It recirculates the air, pulls the air out, brings fresh air conditioned air back into the room. And
that's amazing. Did you put that in too, or did you use a room in the house that already had that in place, or how'd you get that in place?
It's actually a room that already existed, and I guess it was a den or something like that when we bought the house, and it has the heating and ventilation already built into it, so it was just a matter of sealing off that window. There's also the door coming into the room. I should mention that because you usually get the light cracks around the edge of the door.
Right.
And I just have a big curtain of darkroom cloth that simply slides across the door and seals that off.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. I've got like some sound blankets that hang for when I do this video. I have some in front of me as well that they have the black versions, which also can work for light darkening too, and make them to go in front of doors, so you can put on both sides too. Yeah, there's lots of options, which is really cool to handle that aspect. Yeah, it looks like you put a lot of effort into a DIY home darkroom system, and obviously it's working for you, which is amazing. So, and I love the fact that you're trying to make it easier and easier by building, you building the shutter for the window and eventually automating that and figuring out how to handle the door. It's so good that you're handy enough to get all that in place. So what motivates you to continue creating images, both film and digital? What motivates that?
A lot of it is just I live in a very unique little community. It's called Fort Langley. We're located about 30 minutes from the gorgeous city of Vancouver. And Fort Langley is, how do I describe it? It's if you walked into a small town in the 1950s, that's Fort Langley, and they've maintained that feel. So it's a very quaint little town, and we're also very historic. This is the birthplace of Western Canada. So the very first establishment. And a lot of my photography is around within that immediate community, just documenting the area, documenting the community, the people, the events. So that's a big part of it. Another part of it is just these wonderful cameras I have. There's an old saying that the camera doesn't make the photographer. You can't give somebody a really good camera and turn them into a really good photographer. It doesn't work that way. And yet, if you give somebody a camera they really enjoy working with, that won't turn them into a really great photographer, but it motivates them to get out and use that camera, and that will turn them into a good photographer.
Right.
So big part of mine is
I completely agree.
Yeah, using the cameras that I love using.
Yeah. It is funny because the whole gear acquisition syndrome is it is a problem that a lot of photographers face. A lot of people in any industry face, of course, with equipment. Musicians, they want more
Right.
guitars and more soundboards and more mics. But it is kind of a mental thing that you get this new piece of equipment and it does inspire you to try new things and to do more. Something as simple as for example, I have a little cheapy mirror thing on top of my Nikon Z6, which I'm staring at right now, and all it does is it's a non-digital way for me to view my flip up, LCD on the back of the camera, and all it does is it just makes me want to practice, different video setups so I can see myself. So it's something as stupid as that. It's going to inspire you to try and practice. So I definitely agree with what you just said there. So when it comes to learning more about photography, in what ways do you absorb content or to find ways to learn? Where do you go? What platform or media style do you prefer?
Well, I love looking at material from the masters, Ansel Adams. I like shooting landscapes, so I love his stuff. And Henri Cartier-Bresson for street photography. And I have a number of those books, and sometimes I just like to sit down with them with a cup of coffee and leaf through those. So that's part of it. But I also follow some modern photographers. Thomas Heaton is hands down my favorite landscape photographer. I love watching what he does and his books and material. So I learn every time I watch his programs. Sean Tucker is another that I really enjoy. We have a very good friend of mine. He's a Fuji X photographer right here in close to my home, Ian McDonald. He's an amazing photographer, and I like looking at the work that he's doing and just interacting with him a lot. So interacting with other photographers and just looking at media. As far as online media, I enjoy Flickr. Flickr's the photo focus group. There's some really high quality groups. A lot of people say that Flickr's old and going away, and I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, it's got some pretty cool stuff going, and now with SmugMug owning it, right. I think we're going to see some amazing things. So and there's some awesome groups, and unlike a lot of the stuff on social media, where a lot of the feedback is just nasty, and I just don't see that on Flickr. And so I spend also on Flickr, you're looking at photos in much larger resolution than little Instagram pictures. Right. So yeah, so that's another source.
Nice. Yeah, it seems like you like to get information from a variety of media formats, but the big trending thing there is the engagement. It's the back and forth, whether it's with a whole bunch of random photographers or a photographer that you look up to and try to get inspired by. Just a quick note, if you hear my son screaming in the background, I apologize. I don't know what is going on out there, but the joy of pandemic and just being home. So I want to take a short break and remind everybody that Photo Focus turned 21, and they're hosting an incredible contest that is free to join at photofocus.com/celebrate. The current prize is a photo toolbox with over $300 of prizes, including ebooks, LUTs, Photoshop layer styles, Photoshop and Lightroom presets, textures, and even 2 video courses. So that's incredible. Definitely sign up if you haven't already. And again, as a reminder that you can use the Q&A or the live chat in either the webinar or on the YouTube live stream and ask a question for Jim to answer. We've got a few more questions on this end. We're going to look at some of his photos. So if you have a question you want to ask, now is a good time to get it in there, but you still got some time after this. So
I have one quick question. Can I ask a
Yeah.
question?
Go for it.
When you, I know from my own experience that through teaching you learn, and I know that you teach when it's not the pandemic and COVID, you teach film photography. Do you still find yourself learning new things as you're teaching others?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, Lauri, because absolutely. Every time I go out with a student, whether it's be one-on-one or in a classroom session, they ask questions that I've never thought of before,
Right.
and or they ask me to explain something in a new way, or they bring an entirely new point of view. So yeah, that's a major source of inspiration. Just the interaction with students, and both in photography and in my regular profession, they're constantly pushing the boundaries.
So there's a couple of questions that have come in just now. One is, what are your preferred film stocks?
Preferred film stocks for I shoot a lot of different films, but I guess my preferred film stock for black and white would be Ilford. Specifically, I like Ilford FP4, which is a 100 ISO film, fairly fine grain. I also shoot a lot of Ilford HP5, and I bulk load my film, so my film costs are extremely low. And I have both of those in bulk loaders. I also shoot a variety of other films. One of the things I like about film photography is it's a smorgasbord of, I'm shooting a film now that I've never shot before, JCH Street Pan, and brand new film on the market. And I've never shot it before, haven't developed yet, I don't know what it's going to look like.
There's a bunch of brands that are doing brand new, unique, and interesting films. Like there's the Impossible. There's what's it called? Lomographies. It was putting out film for a while. So it's cool that a lot of companies are trying to innovate in film, which is it's interesting to see. So I look forward to hearing how that film does. That's Japan camera, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, cool.
There's so many new films that are coming out on the market and even old films that were discontinued that are coming back.
Right.
And film is just growing by leaps and bounds. And we're seeing films that we've never seen before. Films that have been out of production for 10 years, 20 years are coming back on the market again. It's really cool.
Great. Lauri, you said there was another question?
Yeah, it was just, I was just typing some of the answer in, but I couldn't remember all of it. Who are the photographers that you follow? I know you said Ian McDonald and Thomas Heaton.
And Sean Tucker.
Sean Tucker.
Okay.
Sean Tucker. Yeah.
All right.
I've got a related question to the film question. So when it comes to the digital side, are you using any presets for film replication, or are you just starting from scratch? We're going to get to your editing stuff in a little bit, but I'm just in general, do you use film replication presets or more of a start from scratch type of thing?
No, I start from scratch. I shoot raw.
Cool.
And I edit from there. I actually try to do very little, as little post production as I can get away with.
Cool. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm a purist in that way. I like to try to do more in camera and less after, whenever possible.
Yeah.
So how has photography changed the way that you see the world?
You sent me that question ahead of time, and I've been thinking about it for a week, and I still don't have an answer to it. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've seen the world through the lens of a camera now for 47 years. And I think I see everything from that perspective. I'll be sitting on the couch, I'll see a stream of light coming in through the French doors across the floor, and I'll be looking at it going, that might be a nice picture. I'll see something on the as I'm walking down the street, or and I just stop and I look at it. Oh, I like that, and I'll shoot it. Sometimes I'll be laying in bed at night, and all of a sudden a thought will come into my head. There's a picture that I want to shoot, maybe a still life that I want to shoot, and so they kind of come out of the spur of the moment. I don't know that it really, I guess if we were to say, how does it change my life? I tend to see light. I tend to look for puddles of light. I shoot a lot of black and white. I shoot color as well, but a lot of black and white. So so contrast is really important. And I tend to look for that when I'm just walking down the road.
And it never
That
ever
is a
stops,
good
right?
one.
It never
Yeah.
stops.
No,
Yep.
no.
Yep. It's kind of it's my daughter does that right now. She's 5, and I feel like this is something that goes away when you as you get older. But then for me, it brought it back with photography. That as we're walking, let's say we're walking downtown and where we live, and there's some crazy shadows, she'll start jumping over the shadows, right? And as you get older, you just don't pay attention to it anymore. You're not a kid, right? But then you start doing photography, and now you're noticing those again, right?
Yeah.
And now you may not want to jump over it, but you want to photograph it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was a you may not have been able to think of an answer, but you got a good one. I like it.
Okay,
I like
good.
Yeah. So we are going to I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to look at some of your photos.
Okay.
Share, and I want to share this. So let me know when you see your photo up on the screen.
Yeah,
I can't see much right now besides that. So, okay. So, this photo, what made you stop and create this image?
Well, so this is the town I live in, and we're on what's called the Bedford Channel, and this little bridge extends over to an island, and all the way down the water is a seawall walkway that I frequent quite frequently with my dog. And so one day I was going down, I just liked the light, the light in the clouds as reflected off the ripples of the water. And the fact that I caught the 2 seagulls in there was pure luck. There was no skill in that at all.
And they're right in that cloud, right? They're not even, they're like right in that cloud area.
Yeah, it was total luck. But one of the things that you asked me to give you some photos that were significant, and this one was, because on this day I was actually I was shooting both digital and film, and I was shooting with my Pentax 139 here, and as I'm taking the pictures, there's a young fellow beside me with he's got his big Canon, and he's firing away shots, and I'm sitting there with my film camera, and all of a sudden he kind of looks over at me with a hesitation in his voice, and he says, "Is that film?" And I said, "Yeah, it was." And we started a conversation, and he was just fascinated by it. He said he'd seen pictures of film cameras, he'd heard about it, but never actually seen one. And I allowed him to I gave him the camera to take a few pictures, and I said I'd digitize them and send them over to him. His name was Ted, and we've stayed in touch over the years now. And Ted is now living in Toronto, and he is shooting entirely film.
That's awesome.
And, that was taken on the day that picture was shot.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. So the image looks really sharp. Like that bridge looks really crisp with the nice soft clouds. So I'm curious about the post-processing for this. Like what did you go through to bring everything out?
I wish I could tell you something complicated. Adjust the contrast a little bit, nudge the clarity just maybe a couple %, and that's it. Maybe a little bit of cropping.
There's a question too. Somebody asked that they wanted to know how you digitize your film.
Digitizing the film is done very easily. I used to have a scanner, did that for a while, absolutely despised it. And the setup, I'm not sure if you can see behind me, right here. This is a Fuji X-T20 with a macro lens on a light pad. And that's used to digitize the images. And I find I can get images that are vastly better than I could ever get on my Epson scanner. And not only that, I can get them in a fraction of the time. I could digitize an entire roll of 36 exposures in the amount of time it used to take me with my scanner to do a single image. And so that's
wow, that's interesting. I always thought it would be the opposite, that it would take longer to do it that way.
No, not at all. It's
interesting.
So incredibly fast.
One of my photography mentors, I've known him for a very long time, and he was a teacher at a high school, actually, for photography. Ran the whole department for years, and he is digitizing. He's been doing this project, digitizing all of his old film from 35 millimeter up to large format, and he's doing the same exact method that you're doing. Set up a camera stand, basically, with lights and doing everything like that, and he's knocking them out, pumping them raw files right into Lightroom and digitizing every single one. So it's a
funny story about how that came about. I was talking to a friend who is curator at the Royal Museum in Victoria, British Columbia, and I was complaining about my scanner, and he laughed. He said, "You're scanning?" And I said, "Yeah, what are the alternatives?" He said, "We haven't been scanning in the museum industry for a decade." And he told me all about digitizing with a camera, and I've been doing it ever since.
So somebody asked what the scanning info again was, like what gear what you're using.
As far as the camera goes? Or
yeah, or what, I mean, I think you do use macro is the best lens to use, a macro lens. Yeah, right. So, and then a light source underneath, like a light pad, or as long as it's a bright light.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Fuji X-T20. I'm using a 7 Artisans 60 millimeter f2.8 macro, beautiful lens, and the light pad is just a fairly inexpensive one that I bought off Amazon. So, and the nice thing with scanning, you got to go buy this scanner that's single use. It only has one purpose. Yeah. And with this setup, I mean, the X-T20 with the macro lens, I use that for macro shots, not just scanning negatives. I use it frequently for other purposes.
One of the nice things about this method of digitizing your film is, so you're saying you're using a 7 Artisans lens. It's a macro lens, 60 millimeter. It does not have to be autofocus, right? So you don't have to get the OEM brand. You don't have to get one that's got all the bells and whistles. You're talking, this camera is fixed. You're basically, if you're doing 35 millimeter, your camera's at a certain height off the plane. You're focusing on that plane once, scanning all your negs. If you're going to medium format, you'll need to adjust, refocus, scan all your negs. Large format, same thing. But it's not like you're moving around. Your subject's not moving. So you don't need the most expensive macro lens. You need a good quality macro lens that has manual focus, right? Which is pretty much,
you actually don't want autofocus, because what'll happen with the autofocus is it'll constantly be every time you move your negative, it's gonna change. With this one, I set it to f8. I'll use with the camera, I'll pop up the viewfinder, and you're familiar with focus peaking? So focus peaking allows you to, or focus highlighting, sometimes some brands call it, allows you to very quickly just nail the focus on that first negative. Once you got that negative done, it's next negative, you don't change anything. Frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, and just quickly through your entire roll of film.
Yeah, I love it. I don't know, Lauri, about you, but I think it would be cool if we talk to Brian and see if we can get Jim to guest post about.
I was just thinking the same thing, because I'm like, I could probably write it, but I don't have that set up. Like I have a macro lens, I could, but I don't have, and it's something that I've been working on. I have a really old Wolverine or something scanner where you put the little tray in and you slide it and push it through and press the button and push it through and press the button. And it's seriously, it's probably 8 years old. And I have a unbelievable amount of old slides from my husband's stepdad, old World War II planes, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, this is a humongous project, you know? And I'm like, oh my God, I started it, but it's just sitting there. So, but yeah, I'm with you there. I think it would be awesome for you. If you would be interested in doing that, writing
Yeah,
up,
I'd love to.
Awesome.
Sure.
Cool.
We're going to make it happen, whether Brian likes it or not.
I'm sure he'll be
But
on
I'm pretty
board.
sure,
I'm
pretty sure he's
okay.
going to be on board. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the next one. I love this one. There's so much going on here. It is really, really fun to look at. What I know it would make me stop to create this, but what made you stop to create this one?
Well, story behind this one is my daughter and I were out doing some street photography in Vancouver. My whole family were all photographers. My wife and I, when we got married, our first requirement for our very first home had to have space for a darkroom. So, so my kids are both into photography. My daughter and I were in Vancouver doing some street photography in a place called Granville Street, and we're walking along, and I was looking in another direction, and I heard these birds, this commotion behind me. And I turned around, this guy was feeding the pigeons. And I looked at him and I saw the guy sitting on the bench next to them. And I just realized I needed to capture this image. Yeah. So raised the camera to my eye and caught it. It's one of my personal favorites of my collection.
What my favorite part about this isn't even the fact that this guy is like loving the pigeons eating out of his hand. It's the guy on that's next to him on the bench, looking at him like, "Are you crazy?"
Right.
Yeah,
you know that you could tell in his facial expression, he is not enjoying the fact that there's pigeons all around.
When I first took this, I was talking to a friend of mine, another photographer, and he suggested I crop that guy out, and I go, no, he's a very important part of that image.
Yep.
Yeah. And also, you should be able to see my mouse here.
No, that's the first thing I saw too. When did you take this? Like how long ago?
I think this was about 3 years ago.
Right. So that wasn't even really a thing then. The hand sanitizer, right?
Yeah, no, this was pre-COVID.
Yeah. This is just a guy who had the plan to go feed the pigeons, and he brought hand sanitizer or soap or whatever. Like, it's just so funny.
Yeah,
There's just so much going on here that and like the four guys in the background, they don't even know what they're about to walk into.
Right.
They're not even paying attention. Yep. Oh, it's so good. So I'm assuming, based on our conversation, that there wasn't much editing going on here. Can you go into that a little bit?
Maybe the only editing might have been just a little bit of, I'm not even sure if I cropped it. If so, there was very slight. And maybe just bump up the contrast just a smidge. That's all.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, it's just it's the tone of the black and white image is just beautiful. As you can tell, there's so much that you can talk about. I love this image. It's so good. All right. Last one. Can I guess that this is your son?
Nope. This is actually one of my students, not photography. As I mentioned, I work in healthcare, and this was one of my students. And the course I was teaching is very intense, and throughout the weeks that he was in my class, during breaks, students would wander off, go grab coffee, and do whatever it is students do. And this fellow, his name is Donovan, and Donovan would pull out this old book that he had with him, and he would sit there and he would sketch, and he drew these amazing sketches. And I talked to him about it, and he said it helps him to relieve stress. Mm-hmm. And I was watching him one day as he's sketching, and there's a window off to the side. And I remember we talked about the looking for pools of light. And I saw the light coming in, and I asked Donovan, I said, Donovan, would you mind if I took a couple pictures while you're doing that? He said, no, not at all. And so this was the result. And
Nice.
it was just, he was a very, very cool student to have. And it's just a moment that I was able to capture. It's interesting. He used his sketches to relieve stress. And I know as photographers, I come from a very high stress occupation. And for me, photography has always been a stress reliever. I'd be spending my days working in the emergency department and have a really tough shift. And one of the things I like to do is go grab my camera and just go shoot some pictures.
Yeah.
And so a good friend of mine has been a paramedic for many years and struggling with PTSD. And his camera's photography has been a lifesaver for him. So as
Amazing.
artists, sometimes our art can be more than that. It can be therapy.
Therapy, yeah, for
Donovan
sure.
was a reflection of that.
That's nice.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could definitely tell that this is a very natural, organic, very true image, that he's definitely deep into it, that he knows you're taking pictures, but he's not paying attention to you. He's just in it. He's in his zone. Awesome. So can you talk about the editing for this one?
Again, very little, a little bit of cropping and bump the contrast, might have edged the clarity up just a little bit to sharpen the drawings on the paper.
Nice. I love the simplicity. I'm a big fan of simplicity. All right, let's stop screen sharing. And now, if you can, share a tip for photographers about either technique, about equipment, not like you haven't shared enough today already, but if you've got something that you haven't brought up before, I would love it if you could share something for anybody who's watching live or later on in the replays that they can walk away not from.
Okay, well, let's. I deal with a lot of people who are interested in getting into film photography. And one of the most common questions I get is, what camera do I get? And my response to them is, I don't care, get a good one. And go to, look for a very simple camera. Classic would be the Pentax K1000, something just very, very basic, very simple camera. And these cameras are they're old, but they're purely mechanical, which means they'll last forever. And usually all it takes is replacing some light seals. And if it's a camera that does have a meter, replacing a battery, and you can get them back servicing again. And it takes very little. So also a lot of these old mechanical cameras, even if they aren't working, it usually isn't that difficult to get them working. I get a lot of people bringing me cameras who, I got this camera that somebody gave to me and I don't think it's working, or I want to shoot. Can you take a look at it for me? And I'm not a camera technician, but 90% of the time I can fix the problem. It usually doesn't take very much to get these old cameras working again. So if you have opportunity to get your hands on an old film camera, don't give up on it. Don't throw it away. Put a little bit of, give it a little bit of love. And these old film cameras, they will outlive your digital gear by 100 years.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Great advice. Great advice.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you, Jim, for not only coming on, but sharing some really juicy stuff.
Yeah, this was really good.
This was fantastic. I think that this is going to be one that not only digital photographers will enjoy, but of course the film photographers or those who want to get into film.
Right.
They're gonna you guys you're gonna walk away with some good stuff. And I really hope that you know, you take us up on this and you write some sort of article about your process of scanning, because it's going to make a lot of people's lives very happy to get
Yes.
those digitized in an affordable and easy way with the digital camera they already have potentially. So,
Yep. And you
um,
don't need a dark room. You
Right.
don't need a dark
Right.
room. It
Right.
can all be done in your kitchen.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Jim, for joining. Thanks, Lauri, for
Thank you.
being my sidekick as always. And we're gonna go with the outro and stop the live stream. So here we go.